the senator from Georgia is in the process of doing something that I believe can be the single most important salvation to the political battle in Washington this year. And he will speak about that as you know, the original political outsider, grew up in Georgia, worked his way through Georgia Tech, spent 4 decades in business, and before serving in the U.S. Senate, is the only Fortune 500 CEO in Congress. Sits on the banking, budget, armed services, and agriculture committees. Ladies and gentlemen, David Perdue, Senator.
Bob, thank you. And I want to tell the congressman I think I enjoyed his speech. I couldn't tell. I was taking a nap over there. So, no, I'm delighted. One of the honors I have is to serve up here with people like, the congressman. I have to tell you, there is a minority up here, though, that are really trying to change the direction of the country. I want to just give you just 2 seconds. I want to get to your questions and have a dialogue this morning, but I got elected as an outsider, never ran, never wanted to. And before I get started, I want to tell you how important Jenny Beth Martin has been to me. She was always someone that wanted the right thing for our country. Jenny Beth really helped me focus on what the priorities were. So Jenny Beth, thank you. And I'm going back years on this, so thank you for that. And Jim DeMint, I really didn't know Jim. I knew his reputation and that sort of thing. But this past week, we had an opportunity with Jenny Beth and Jim to really get together with people who are active in the Senate and people on the outside trying to do the same thing. And we actually had a presser, and from 2 different points of view, you guys and we have put pressure at the right point, and we're gonna get some results out of that. But before I get into that, I'd love to just tell you a little bit about how I see the game right now. The congressman mentioned this, but we're in a battle for the direction of the country, and we were this close to, I believe, losing the ability to change that direction. For the last 100 years, we, the Republicans, and by the way, this is not about Republicanism or Democrat. This is about conservative values, the things that really this country was founded on. Economic opportunity, fiscal responsibility, limited government, and individual liberty. And I just got back from China, and I can tell you, the struggle we've got for the next 50 years is not inside our borders. The struggle we have is between self-determination and state control. And if you ever lose sight of that, then we're not going to be as effective as we need to be. And to get our house in order, we've got to fix the things that are broken in Washington. Then what I ran on was that Washington was broken. If you wanted different results, you had to send a different kind of person up here. And I felt like I offered up a different kind of person. And in the last 100 years, we've had 3 political supermajorities, all Democrat. Republicans have been the minority party for the last 100 years. And those 3 supermajorities, all Democratic, gave us the New Deal, the Great Society, and Dodd-Frank and Obamacare. And I can tell you, I'm just a business guy, but I can tell you, I can put at the feet of this fiscal catastrophe that we have right now, this crisis as I call it, at the feet of those 3 supermajorities. But Republicans aren't innocent either. In 2000, the size of the government was $2.4 trillion. Last time I looked, it was $4.2 trillion, constant dollars. 1 Republican president, 1 Democratic president. And I can tell you that that's unacceptable, and that's our problem. We collect $2 trillion today in taxes. We spend half of that before we do anything else. We never even have a conversation about this. Half of it gets spent this way. $100 billion subsidizes the shortfall in the trust fund for Social Security. That already happens this year. That grows to $500 billion in the planning period of 10 years. The second thing that happens is we put $480 billion to subsidize the shortfall in the Medicare trust fund. And the third thing we do is we put $465 billion in Medicaid. That was never supposed to be that big. That's $1 trillion of the $2.2 trillion we collect in taxes every year. Ladies and gentlemen, the last decade, every dime we spent on our military, every dime we spent on our veterans, and every dime we spent on all domestic discretionary spending has been borrowed, by definition. 35% of what we spent in the last decade has been borrowed. And the projection is, unless we do something, as a congressman is saying, we're going to borrow another 30% over the next decade. That can't happen. The bond markets won't let it happen and all that. So let me give you some hope. I don't think anybody saw Donald Trump coming. He's nobody's choir boy, I'm here to tell you. But this guy is willing to break some eggs, and he's not an ideologue. And that makes some of us nervous, frankly, because when he was running, I was up close to him, and I was a little bit concerned about some of the things that he was saying and doing. But This guy is a pragmatist. He wants to get results, and he loves this country, and he wants to change the direction of the country. So let me give you some hope today as we start this dialogue about what we do next. This president came in and said job one was to grow the economy. Why? Well, he knows about the debt crisis. He doesn't talk about it a lot because he understood what he had to do to get elected, he thought. Now, I ran on the debt. People told me I couldn't talk about the debt and get elected. Well, we did. Well, I was in the White House in February, 2 weeks after the inauguration last year, and it was a leadership meeting. It was McConnell and Cornyn, it was Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, and Steve Scalise, and I was in there, and I thought, well, why am I here? And the president made it pretty clear very early that he wanted somebody in the room that had actually done something in the free enterprise system to be in the conversation, because we were going to talk about the priorities for the first 2 years. And the president wanted to do tax first, and he got talked out of that by the leadership because they want to do health care first. And the president's all about building confidence. You get the economy going, get people back to work, get them enthusiastic again, and then we can talk about some of the heavy lifts like Social Security and Medicare that we've got to get to. So what he focused on was regulation, energy, and taxes. And guess what? That's what we did. And the fourth thing is we had to free capital up. At that time, we were sitting in a meeting where in a $20 trillion economy, $6 trillion was not at work in this economy. $6 trillion. And both sides were guilty of that, by the way. Now, what we worked on, $2 trillion was on the Russell 1000 largest corporation balance sheets because of the regulatory environment and the uncertainty and the risk involved in making long-term investments. The second thing is we had $2 trillion on the bank balance sheets of small and regional banks. And we also had over $2 trillion overseas stuck in U.S. profits stuck overseas because of our archaic repatriation tax law. Well, combined, when the House next week votes on this Dodd-Frank bill, we will pull back on a significant portion of the reserve requirement, capital reserve requirement on these small banks and community banks and free up that $2 trillion. The tax bill, the repatriation law has been reversed. That freed up $2 trillion. And then right now, the regulatory work, 870 regulations and rules have been reversed in the last year, 3.5 million jobs created. This thing is moving. I just got back from a week running around Georgia and meeting with people, employees of companies. And the biggest thing they're bragging about is what the companies have done in their retirement plans because of the tax bill. Not the one-time bonus or whatever, those are great. But these people are increasing the percentage contribution, the percentage match going into these retirement plans. I heard people, ordinary people, people who work on their feet, people who work with their hands, people who take a bath at the end of the day after their job, not at the beginning of the day, tell me how great it was to have somebody standing up for them in the White House again. The congressman mentioned breaking eggs. The president talks about it in those terms. I voted against this spending bill. Not because I didn't want to fund the military, but because it added $2 trillion to our debt. And I will tell you this. That's not for me. This is, you know, the president, this is so insidious, guys. You just heard how we fund. And by the way, the last time we funded the federal government on time by September 30th was 1996, 22 years ago. We've only done it 4 times since the Budget Act of '74 was put in place, only 4 times. We're supposed to pass 12 bills in the Senate. The House gets their job done, by the way. The House will appropriate 12 bills. That somehow works. In the Senate, it doesn't work. It's broken. It will never work, and we're trying to change that with a select committee on the budget. But we are supposed to pass 12 bills. We've only averaged 2.5 in the last 44 years. That's why Washington is broken. That's what we're trying to change. So we're putting pressure right now to try to fund this government on time, to try to move nomination. We have 284 nominees waiting in line right now to be confirmed. And so I'm anxious to hear the conversation today. I appreciate the opportunity. More than anything else, I want to thank you for your leadership in putting pressure on this town, because the current direction we were headed 2 years ago is unacceptable, and we've got to change that. Thank you.